I gave my stepmother the perfect Mother's Day gift, and then I watched her face as she realized what it really meant. When my dad married Cassandra, I was 11 years old. Mom had been gone for 13 months, melanoma that spread faster than anyone expected. One day she was complaining about a headache, and 82 days later, I was standing in front of her grave in a black dress that still had the tags on. Dad waited exactly 1 year before bringing Cassandra home. She worked at his investment firm in client relations. Perfect teeth, blonde hair that never moved, the kind of woman who wore heels to other people's barbecues. She makes me happy again, Dad explained with a voice that was soft but firm. I need you to try, Emily. So I tried. I helped Cassandra move in, carrying boxes of designer shoes into the closet where Mom's gardening clothes used to be. I nodded politely when she rearranged our furniture, replacing family photos with abstract art that opened up the space. I even smiled when she transformed Mom's vegetable garden into a meditation patio, because growing our own food was so provincial. For 3 years, I played the role of the grateful stepdaughter. I attended her corporate events wearing the dresses she bought me. I tolerated her friends who cooed about how mature I was for 14. I kept my pain hidden behind perfect grades and fake smiles. Dad didn't notice when I stopped laughing, too busy with Cassandra's social calendar and the new clients she brought in, too distracted by their couples retreats and wine club memberships. Meanwhile, I slept with Mom's sweater under my pillow until it stopped smelling like her. Cassandra tried in her own way. She bought me expensive birthday gifts, always things she would want. She hosted elaborate dinners and introduced me as our daughter to important people who never remembered my name. She even started a college fund for me, making sure everyone knew about her generosity. But when I got my first period, it was Google that taught me what to do. When I had nightmares about Mom's death, it was the family dog who comforted me. The breaking point came during sophomore year. I was given the lead role in the school play, the first thing I'd felt passionate about since Mom died. Opening night happened to fall on the same evening as Cassandra's charity gala. Obviously you'll have to skip the performance, she said without looking up from her phone. The Richardsons are bringing their son. He goes to Princeton. Connections, Emily. Dad started to object, then stopped when Cassandra placed her hand on his arm. It's just a school play, she said finally. There will be others. I went to my room and pulled out the antique jewelry box Mom had left me. Inside was her wedding ring, a lock of my baby hair, and a journal I had never opened, too scared to face her final thoughts. That night, through tears, I read it from cover to cover. Most of it was what you'd expect, her hopes for my future, memories she cherished, advice she couldn't give me in person. But the last entry, dated 2 weeks before her death, was different. If you're reading this, Emily, it began, I need you to know about the safety deposit box. The key is taped inside this cover. What you find there will change everything. I'm so sorry. The key was small and silver, engraved with the name of the bank. The next day, I skipped school and went to First National. The manager recognized me. Mom's family had used that bank for generations. Your mother said you'd come eventually, he said, leading me to the vault. Inside the box was a USB drive, several folders of documents, and a letter addressed to me in Mom's handwriting. My dear Emily, it began. By now Cassandra has probably integrated fully into your lives. I've known about her for years. I read the letter twice, my hands shaking. Mom had discovered Dad's affair with Cassandra 6 months before her diagnosis. She had hired a private investigator who documented everything, hotel receipts, text messages, photos of them together while Mom was picking me up from soccer practice. The investigator's report was meticulous, spanning months. There were photos of Dad and Cassandra entering hotels in 3 different cities. Screenshots of text messages that turned my stomach. She's taking Emily to her mother's this weekend. Come over, Karen. Can you imagine when we no longer have to hide? And then the last one, from Dad, sent 4 months before Mom got sick. Sometimes I wish she'd just disappear. I went through credit card statements that showed dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of. On nights when Dad claimed to be working late, there were receipts for jewelry that never made it to Mom's vanity, a lease agreement for an apartment downtown that didn't appear in any family records. But there was more. The files contained financial records showing that Dad and Cassandra had been systematically transferring funds from Mom's family trust, money meant for me, into offshore accounts. They had been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment. Mom's family had built one of the city's largest investment firms over 3 generations. When she married Dad, he was just a promising young advisor with ambition. She had brought him into the firm, mentored him, helped him rise to partner. The trust was her family's legacy, and I was meant to be its future. I found detailed spreadsheets tracking millions diverted through shell companies, fake client accounts, and manipulated investments. The money passed through a dozen countries before disappearing into numbered accounts. Dad's signature appeared on every critical document, Cassandra's on most of them. The worst part? Medical records that suggested Mom's sudden decline may not have been so sudden after all. Strange test results. Unusual prescriptions. Toxicology reports she had commissioned privately when she began to suspect something. I started feeling sick after our anniversary dinner, Mom wrote. At first just tired, then increasingly ill. The doctors couldn't explain my symptoms. When I began keeping a record, I noticed I only felt this way after meals Thomas had prepared, especially those made just for me. There were lab reports analyzing hair samples, showing elevated levels of heavy metals consistent with long-term poisoning. Test results on food samples from our home. Notes from consultations with 3 different medical specialists who had all observed the unusual progression of her symptoms. I can't prove anything, Mom wrote. And by the time you read this, it won't matter for me. But I couldn't leave you unprotected. The final page of her letter outlined her counterplan, a second, secret trust she had set up in my name. The house and the business I believed Dad controlled were, technically, mine. When I turned 18, Mom had changed her will 2 weeks before she died, working with lawyers Dad didn't even know existed. I've made sure that what is rightfully yours stays yours, she wrote. The trustees will reach out to you automatically on your 18th birthday. But if you find this letter earlier, you can contact them using the information in the attached envelope. They are ready when you are. I sat in the private room of the bank for hours, absorbing everything. When I finally walked out, I was different. The grief and confusion that had defined me for 3 years had crystallized into something harder, something focused. I didn't confront Dad immediately. I didn't run or call the police. I did something scarier. I became the perfect daughter. For the next 2 years, I behaved impeccably. I excelled in school. I joined the clubs Cassandra suggested. I attended every boring corporate function. I wore the right clothes, said the right things, and never, never, let them see what I knew. At night, I meticulously documented their ongoing schemes. Every time Dad mentioned a difficult client or a complex investment strategy at dinner, I researched the companies involved, tracing the money through their maze of fake entities. I created my own spreadsheets based on Mom's work. My bedroom became my command center. I installed a safe hidden behind my bookshelf where I kept copies of everything. I recorded conversations at family dinners, business discussions they thought I wasn't listening to. I photographed documents Dad brought home and carelessly left on his desk, trusting that his 16-year-old daughter would never understand their significance. 6 months after finding Mom's letter, I felt ready to contact her trustees. The envelope contained 3 business cards, a forensic accountant, a lawyer specializing in financial crimes, and a retired judge who had been my grandfather's closest friend. I met with them at the judge's house on a Saturday, when I was supposedly at debate team practice. I had told them everything over the phone, but seeing their faces as they reviewed the actual evidence was different. The accountant closed his eyes briefly when he saw the extent of the fraud. The lawyer swore under her breath. The judge looked at me with a mixture of sorrow and cold fury. "Your mother was one of the finest people I've ever known," he said. "What do you want to do, Emily?" I had spent months considering my options. I could have exposed everything immediately, sending Dad and Cassandra to prison. I could have run away, waiting until I turned 18 to claim my inheritance. I could have confronted them, forcing a painful reckoning. Instead, I chose the path Mom had started, methodical, precise, justice. I want to learn everything, I told them. About the business, about finance and law, and how to run a company. I want to be ready when I take it all back. The judge nodded, unsurprised. "Your mother said you'd say that. She left instructions for us in case you chose this path." Over the next 18 months, I lived a double life. At home and school, I was the perfect, accomplished daughter Cassandra could brag about at parties. But 3 nights a week, I snuck off to study groups and volunteer work that were actually intensive training sessions with my secret team. The forensic accountant taught me how to read financial statements, detect fraud, and understand the complex web of transactions that kept the family business running. The attorney educated me in corporate law, contracts, and the specific legal frameworks that would eventually allow me to take control. The judge introduced me to his contacts in banking, investment, and regulatory agencies, people who had respected Mom and were disgusted by what had happened to her firm. Meanwhile, I worked with Mom's lawyers, preparing everything: the trust, the evidence, the plan. I graduated high school at 16, a year early. Dad and Cassandra were thrilled. Their prodigy going to Yale early on a full scholarship. What they didn't know was that I'd also been taking online business and finance courses, learning everything about Dad's company and the accounts they thought were hidden. "We're so proud of you," Dad said at my small graduation party, just family and a few of their close friends. No one from school. No one who actually knew me. "She's exceeded all our expectations," Cassandra added, her arm around my shoulders for the photographer they'd hired. "Early admission to Yale," she beamed. "The board's already excited about your future with the firm." I smiled and thanked them, knowing that in less than 2 years, would own that board. The summer before college, Cassandra announced that she wanted to adopt me legally. "You're my daughter in every way that matters," she said, touching my cheek during lunch at her favorite, outrageously expensive restaurant. "Let's make it official before you go off to school." I studied her face, searching for any sign of genuine emotion. There was a tightness around her eyes, a calculation in the way she looked at Dad before turning back to me. This wasn't about love. It was about securing her position. An adopted daughter would strengthen her claim to the family business if anything happened to Dad. I smiled and hugged her, whispering that nothing would make me happier. "We should celebrate," Dad said, already motioning for the check. "Maybe a weekend in the Hamptons. We could invite the Prestons. Their son is at Harvard Law." "That sounds perfect," I replied, thinking about the file I had compiled on the Prestons' failing software company and the mysterious cash infusion it had received from one of Dad's shell firms the year before. That night, I called an emergency meeting with my trustees. We met in the judge's study, surrounded by shelves of books, after I told Dad and Cassandra I was spending the night at a friend's to celebrate graduation. "They want me to sign adoption papers," I explained. "I need to know if that affects our plan." The attorney spread documents across the mahogany table. "Actually, this might work in our favor. The adoption process requires financial disclosures. We'll get an updated picture of their assets. And it doesn't change anything about your mother's trust. That's irrevocable." "How close are we?" I asked. The accountant adjusted his glasses. "We've documented 67% of the missing funds. Tracked them through 4 countries to accounts we can identify. It's more than enough for criminal charges." "And the evidence about my mother's illness?" the judge asked gently. That was the hardest part for me, the possibility that Dad hadn't just betrayed Mom, but had actively poisoned her. The medical experts we consulted couldn't definitively prove murder, but the pattern was suspicious enough to warrant an investigation. "Let's keep that separate for now," I decided. One battle at a time. As I prepared to leave, the judge handed me a small wrapped package. "Your mother left this with specific instructions, to be given to you when you were ready to move forward." Inside was a vintage Mont Blanc pen that had belonged to my grandfather. "She used this to sign her first major acquisition," the judge explained. "She said she wanted you to have it when you were ready to reclaim what's yours." I carried that pen with me everywhere after that night, a talisman, a promise. 2 weeks later came Mother's Day. Cassandra had always made a big production of it, expensive brunches, professional photographers to document her mother-daughter bond for social media. This year, she had planned a garden party for 30 of her closest friends. The announcement of the adoption would be the centerpiece. I spent the previous week carefully preparing my gift, working late into the night in my room, compiling documents, organizing evidence, crafting the perfect presentation. The irony didn't escape me. This was the most thoughtful gift I had ever created for her. The morning of the party dawned sunny and mild, perfect weather for Cassandra's meticulously orchestrated event. Vendors arrived at 7, followed by florists, event planners, and a small army of staff transforming our backyard into an elegant venue that looked nothing like the wild garden Mom had loved. I found Cassandra in her dressing room, surrounded by rejected outfit options. "What do you think?" she asked, holding up 2 nearly identical cream-colored dresses. "The Dior or the Chanel?" "The Chanel," I said, noticing how she immediately discarded the Dior she had initially picked. "I have something special for you," I told her, handing her a box elegantly wrapped with a silver ribbon. "Oh, you didn't have to," she said, her surprise almost genuine. We both knew I had never given her a Mother's Day gift before. I wanted to, for today's announcement. She set the box aside. "I'll open it later during the party. It'll be more special that way." "I'd prefer you open it now," I insisted. "It's personal." Something in my tone made her pause. She studied my face, then reached for the box. Inside was a custom-bound book. On the cover, embossed in gold, A Daughter's Gratitude. "Oh, Emily," she breathed, clearly expecting a collection of sentimental photos and tributes. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The first page showed a photo of Mom smiling, from before she got sick. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Keep looking," I said gently. "It gets better." Page by page, the book told the story Mom had left me: hotel receipts, bank statements, medical reports, each one carefully annotated in my neat handwriting. I watched her face change as she turned each page, confusion giving way to shock, then anger, then fear. By the time she reached the section on the diverted trust funds, her makeup had begun to run from the sweat forming on her forehead. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, but she kept turning pages, unable to stop. In the final section, details of the restructured trust, the legal proceedings already in motion, and the scheduled meeting the next day with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. "Those offshore accounts you and Dad set up," I said conversationally, perching on the edge of her vanity, "they're not as impossible to trace as you thought. Did you know that 17 countries have signed new banking transparency agreements in the past 5 years? Or that wire transfers leave timestamps that can match with your phone's location data?" Her face went pale. "You and Dad are going to be very interested in the terms I'm offering," I concluded, still smiling as the doorbell rang, announcing the first guests. "Much better than prison." She stood abruptly, knocking over her mimosa. "You little ingrate." "Careful," I whispered. "Your guests are watching. And I'm still deciding whether to show them what's in Chapter 3. She glanced toward the book, still open to a page showing her text messages to Dad from the week Mom was hospitalized, messages complaining that the hospital visitation schedule was interfering with her dinner reservations. "What do you want?" she asked, straightening her dress with trembling hands. "You're going to go downstairs and host your party. You're going to smile and laugh and be the perfect hostess. And tomorrow morning at 9, you and Dad will meet me in Judge Henderson's office to discuss the terms of your continued freedom." Her eyes scanned the room quickly, perhaps searching for an escape, but finding none. "This is blackmail." "No," I corrected. "This is justice, with a touch of mercy, if you earn it." I moved toward the door. "You have 30 seconds to fix your makeup. People are waiting." The party lasted 3 excruciating hours. Cassandra kept her composure through trembling hands and a fixed smile that never reached her eyes. I played the adoring daughter to perfection, offering a toast to her influence on my life, watching her flinch at every double meaning only we understood. "Emily has been such a blessing," Cassandra told Mrs. Henderson, the judge's wife. "I couldn't love her more if she were my own flesh and blood. And Cassandra has taught me so much," I added, holding her gaze steadily. "About loyalty. About consequences." Mrs. Henderson looked between us, sensing the undercurrent but unable to name it. "Well, it's obvious you two are wonderful for each other." Dad sent a text saying he'd be late from his golf game. It didn't matter. His gift was waiting in his office, an identical book, with additional documents detailing his role in the fraud. The guests gradually filtered out as the afternoon wore on, praising Cassandra for the lovely event and congratulating me on Yale. I stood beside her at the door, accepting hugs from women who smelled of expensive perfume and insecurity, shaking hands with men who had known my grandfather but couldn't quite recall my name. "Is everything all right with Cass?" one of Dad's partners asked discreetly. "She seems tense." "Oh, she's just excited about the adoption," I explained. "Today means a lot to her." After the last guest left, Cassandra disappeared upstairs. I found her 20 minutes later, frantically packing a suitcase. "Going somewhere?" I asked from the doorway. She spun around quickly, a handful of jewelry clenched in her fist. "You can't prove any of this, it's circumstantial. The FBI doesn't think so. Neither does the SEC. But feel free to run. They're expecting it. There's an agent stationed at the end of our street. He's been there for 3 days. That was a bluff. The authorities weren't involved, yet. That was part of the leverage in my negotiation strategy. But Cassandra didn't know that. She collapsed onto the bed, her half-filled suitcase open beside her. What happens now? Now we wait for Dad. Then we discuss terms. Dad arrived an hour later, calling out Cassandra's name as he walked in. I met him in the foyer, his gift in my hands. Where's Cass? How was the party? He asked, loosening his tie. She's upstairs. And I think you should open this first. I watched the same sequence of emotions cross his face as he flipped through the evidence. Unlike Cassandra, he remained completely silent, his lawyer training kicking in even through the shock. When he finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. Where did you get all this? Mom left it for me, along with instructions. Something like pain flickered across his face, quickly suppressed. Emily, whatever you think you know. It's documented. In triplicate. Stored in multiple secure locations, I finished for him. Including evidence on Mom's declining health that suggests more than just financial crimes. His face went pale at that. You don't really believe I poisoned her? I don't know. The evidence is inconclusive. But strong enough for an investigation, if I choose to pursue it. He closed the book carefully, as though it might explode. What do you want? The same thing I told your wife. 9 a.m. tomorrow, Judge Henderson's office. We'll discuss how you can avoid prison. That night, after the guests had gone, after I found Cassandra sitting alone in the darkness of Mom's former garden, surrounded by the sterile white furniture she'd chosen to replace the wildflowers. Why now? She asked, not looking at me. Why wait all this time? I sat beside her, smoothing my dress. Mom taught me patience. And I needed to understand everything first. What do you want? I had rehearsed this moment for 2 years, imagining satisfaction, maybe even joy. But looking at this woman who helped destroy my mother, I felt only emptiness. Dad transfers control of the company to me, through the original trust mechanism. You both resign publicly, but remain on as consultants under my supervision. The money you siphon goes back into the trust. In return, I don't press criminal charges. She laughed bitterly. You're 16. You can't run a company. Almost 17. And I have a team, Mom's trustees. They've been waiting for this day. And I've been training for this half my life. Dad's heavy footsteps approached through the patio. Cassandra's fingers dug into the armrests. He'll never agree to this. I stood up, straightening the necklace Mom had left me. He already has. Check your phone. While we had been speaking, Dad had found his own copy of my Mother's Day gift. His message to Cassandra was only 3 words, she knows everything. Dad joined us in the patio, his face haggard in the fading light. You didn't have to do it this way, he said quietly. You could have come to me directly. Like Mom did? I asked. How did that go, when she confronted you about the affair 4 years ago? Or when she questioned the trust disbursements? How did those direct conversations turn out? He had no answer for that. The business isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet, he tried instead. It's relationships. Client trust. If you force us out, the damage could. Already mitigated, I interrupted. Mom's original team is ready to step in. Most of them never trusted you anyway. They stayed out of loyalty to her memory. He shot Cassandra a furious glance. You said everyone was loyal to you. That you'd secured their support. She lied, I said. Just like she lied about the prenup agreement you signed, the one with the infidelity clause. The one that leaves you with nothing if you divorce. Her head snapped toward him. What prenup agreement? One I have a copy of, I said, along with evidence of your ongoing affair with Ryan Donahue from legal. You really thought those hotel charges wouldn't show up in the expense audits? The color drained from her face. Dad looked confused, then furious as realization dawned. You told me that was over, he growled. It is, she insisted, but her eyes darted away from his. Emily is manipulating you. Actually, that's your specialty, I said, rising to my feet. I prefer direct approaches. 9 o'clock tomorrow. Don't be late. And don't try to leave town, I've got people watching the house. I left them in the patio, their angry whispers trailing behind me. In my room, I called Judge Henderson to confirm our meeting. Then I emailed the full case file to my trustees, with instructions to release it to authorities if I failed to check in before noon the next day. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake, listening to their muffled arguments in the hallway, the occasional crash, a slammed door. Around 3 in the morning, I heard a car start and drive away. At dawn, the house was silent. I dressed carefully for the meeting, a conservative suit Mom had bought me for my first academic competition, her pearl earrings, minimal makeup. Professional. Serious. Older than my years. When I came downstairs, I found Dad alone at the kitchen island, staring into a cup of coffee, still wearing yesterday's clothes. "Where's Cassandra?" I asked, though I already suspected. "She's gone," he said flatly. "Took her jewelry and her car. Left her phone behind so she couldn't be tracked. That complicates things, but it doesn't change them. She's not the primary stakeholder anyway." He looked up, eyes red and empty. "You look like her," he said unexpectedly. "Your mother. When she was fighting for something." The comparison both warmed and hurt. "We should go. The judge doesn't like lateness." The meeting was brief but thorough. Dad, stripped of his usual confidence, signed every document placed in front of him: power of attorney, voting rights transfer, resignation letter. Judge Henderson guided him through each step, his voice neutral, but his eyes cold. "Mr. Gallagher, you understand that these terms are conditional upon your cooperation with the financial recovery team. Any attempt to hide assets or obstruct the process will trigger the criminal charges we've prepared." Dad nodded mechanically. "And the company's announcement will follow the provided script, citing a planned family succession and the desire to honor Catherine's legacy as the reason for the transition." Another nod. "Sign here, and here. Initial these pages." When it was done, Judge Henderson slid one final document across the table. "This stipulates that you will not contact Emily directly, except through approved channels, until she turns 18. All communication will go through my office or the trustees." Dad's head snapped up. "She's my daughter. You don't have to sign it," I said quietly. "Or I release the medical evidence." His hand trembled as he signed the paper. When he set down the pen, the vintage Mont Blanc of Mom's that I had brought specifically for this moment, his shoulders slumped with a finality that made him look suddenly old. "Can I at least explain?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "I've read all your explanations," I replied. "In your emails to Cassandra, in the memos justifying the transfers, in the statement you prepared for the board last year, evaluating me as a potential future figurehead with limited actual authority. I think I understand perfectly." Judge Henderson concluded the meeting, informing Dad that a car was waiting to take him to a hotel. He would be allowed to return to the house the following week to collect personal belongings under supervision. As Dad rose to leave, he paused beside my chair. "Your mother would be proud," he said. And I couldn't tell if it was meant as a compliment or an accusation. "I know," I replied simply. 2 months later, I sat at the head of the conference table in what had once been Dad's office. The company's transition had been announced as a family succession plan, celebrated in press releases about the youngest female CEO in the industry. Dad remained as a figurehead, bound by ironclad contracts that monitored his every financial move. He kept the house, his social position, and avoided prison. In return, I received what was rightfully mine, along with his full submission to quarterly reviews where I audited every aspect of his professional life. The trustees became my executive team, guiding me through the countless decisions required to stabilize the company after years of Dad's manipulation. I postponed Yale for a year, focusing instead on practical business education within the firm. Cassandra resurfaced in Miami 3 weeks after fleeing. The FBI caught her trying to access one of the offshore accounts we had flagged. She spent 2 nights in jail before Dad's lawyers negotiated her release in exchange for full cooperation. She returned to Connecticut under strict monitoring, living in a company-owned condo and working as a client liaison with severely limited authority. The prenup agreement I had mentioned proved prophetic. Dad filed for divorce, citing abandonment and infidelity, leaving her with only what the separation agreement we had crafted allowed. She fought back at first, threatening to expose the company's fraud, until my attorneys reminded her she would be the first target in any investigation. It wasn't justice for Mom, nothing ever could be. But it was the beginning of something she had wanted for me: control over my own future, protection of the legacy she built, accountability for those who had betrayed her. The search for definitive evidence about Mom's illness continued quietly. I hired specialists to re-examine tissue samples the hospital had preserved. I ordered new tests on items from her vanity that I had kept intact. I interviewed medical staff who had treated her. The results remained frustratingly inconclusive, suspicious patterns, but no definitive proof. Dad maintained his innocence on that front, even in private meetings with his lawyers where he admitted everything else. Yes, the cancer was real, he insisted. I never touched her medication. I never tampered with her food. I wanted her gone. Yes, I'm guilty of wishing for her death. But not of making it happen. I didn't know whether to believe him. Part of me needed him to be guilty of everything, a complete monster whose destruction I could pursue without reservation. Another part desperately wanted that one line left uncrossed, to preserve some small fragment of the father I had once loved. The company flourished under new leadership. We untangled Dad's complicated schemes, recovered most of the misappropriated funds, rebuilt client relationships damaged by his shortcuts. I worked 16-hour days, sleeping on the office couch more often than in my bed. Home no longer felt like home. I sold the house 6 months after taking control, moving into an apartment downtown within walking distance of the office. Dad moved into a smaller house in the suburbs, stripped of his country club memberships and most of his social circle after the company's carefully worded but transparent statement made it clear he had been forced out. Last week, I visited Mom's grave for the first time since reading her letter. I did what you asked, I told her, placing wildflowers against the stone. The company is safe. Your legacy is protected. I wish you could see it. As I turned to leave, I noticed a familiar figure watching from a distance, Cassandra, holding a small bouquet of her own. Our eyes met across the cemetery. She didn't approach, but she nodded once before walking away. Some lessons take years to teach. Some gifts keep giving long after they're unwrapped. Every Mother's Day since then, I send Cassandra the same thing. A single photograph of Mom, smiling in her garden, with a note that says, "Thinking of you today." She never replies. But I know she understands. It's the only language we have left. And it says everything that matters.